Dave, are we ready, or should we wait a little bit longer? King Dave. A special session that's intended to address two issues that were still outstanding from our annual meeting, specifically regarding the MSc work plan for this year, as well as finalizing our budget for this upcoming fiscal year as well. I did not have any specific opening statements, but Paul, I'll turn it to you to see if you or other Canadian commissioners have any comments.
No, I don't have any comments at this time. Thanks, Glenn.
Okay. Thanks, Paul. And my American commissioners don't have any other comments. We can go ahead with the adoption of the agenda. There's no objection to the agenda as it's currently structured.
No objections.
Okay, I'm not seeing one. Then perhaps we can just roll right into then the MSc program of work. And Dr. Wilson, should we turn that over to you now?
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. And so we have Dr. Alan Hicks, who's here to present the proposed program of work for the Secretariat for the next couple of years. And so over to you, Dr. Hicks. Thank you.
This is Alan. I briefly lost network connectivity there, and I just I'm not sure if something was meant for me to get started or if everyone was waiting on me. Can we confirm?
Yeah, just go ahead, Alan. We're ready for you to go ahead and present agenda items.
Okay, thank you very much. And if that happens again, I'll switch to the laptop. Okay, so it's great to see everybody. I'm looking forward to the discussion we'll have today. I hope everybody's year has been going well and you're enjoying some good weather today. Certainly are in Seattle. I'm going to present some tasks for a potential MSc program of work that could be done in the next 2 to 3 year period as agenda item 3 for this special session. I wanted to first remind everybody where this special session, or at least the MSc program of work portion of the special session, is coming from, and this was in the report at AM 097. And it was a commission request that the Secretariat develop a draft MSc program of work for review. And we've listed quite a number of tasks, potential tasks in this document provided for this meeting. And it's not that we can accomplish all of those tasks, but a subset of those tasks. And I think that's what we're here to discuss today. And then the other agreement was to meet intersessionally, which we are doing today. I wanted to begin by discussing and having a look back over the last year, basically, at some relevant SRB requests and recommendations. And starting at SRB 16, which happened in June 2020, 1 year ago, here's a few of their notes and requests that I think are pertinent to the discussion today. And first off, in paragraph 27, they talk about extrinsic factors and different drivers on the population. And I just want to note, I won't read this paragraph, but this paragraph relates to the development of alternative operating models and being able to simulate the population in the best way possible and to account for the uncertainty in the population. And that's what developing an operating model is all about, being able to mimic the population for what you know about it, but also being able to simulate the variability in that population as well. They had also had a request to continue work on the simulation of weighted age in this model. And as we know, for Pacific halibut, weighted age is one of the largest drivers of change in biomass from year to year, besides mortality and recruitment influxes. And so this is a very important part of that. And the SRB had a few suggestions to make, hoping that it would have some of that investigation for SRB 18, which has not been completed at this time. So additional work on that would be fruitful for the simulations and the framework. The SRB also made a request to further investigate decision-making variability. And decision-making variability is that difference between what a management procedure suggests and what the decision by the commission may be. And so we've begun to investigate some of that decision-making variability, as you can see in the plot on the lower right of your screen. And what is plotted here on that vertical axis is the adopted TCY, that TCY that came out of the annual meeting and was put into place as the mortality limits. And this is the coast-wide TCY, not looking at regulatory areas here, although we did have a discussion of regulatory area TCYs with the SRB. And then on the horizontal axis is the TCY recommended by the management procedure. So we plot those two against each other. And if they are exactly the same, they would fall on this one-to-one line, or this 45-degree line. And then you have a legend of the years. And actually, there's circles, squares, and a diamond showing the different interim management procedures that were in place in those years. So we had the blue line for a while, and then we moved to this SPR 46% based harvest policy. And then more recently, we moved to an SPR 43% harvest policy. And what you can see is that many decisions were greater than what the management procedure suggested. But there's a couple of years, one in which it was less, 2019, shown by the yellow square. And then 2021, the red diamond was exactly matched the management procedure and the decision on the coast-wide level. So we've begun this investigation, and part of this investigation of decision-making variability made us realize that there are different components of what we call implementation variability. And one component of that is decision-making variability, as I described on the previous slide. Other components include realized variability. So this is when the mortality limits, the decisions made by the commission, are put into place, and then the fleets go out and fish. And they fish for a year, And they're not going to match those limits exactly, although it is very amazing how close they do get to these limits. It's really impressive, actually, but they're not exact. And some fisheries and some regulatory areas might go under, some might be over, but typically it's slightly less than the limit, since these are limits. And so it's good to realize how that occurs for individual fisheries and then to model that appropriately. So a third one that we've just begun to think about, with actually help from the MSAB, is what we're calling observation error or perceived variability. And this is now the difference between what the fleet actually caught and what might be estimated as the mortality. And so for some of these fisheries, especially non-directed discard fisheries, we don't know the exact amount of mortality that's caused by that fleet, and so we estimate it using various methods. And some MSAB members are very interested in at least learning more about this observation error, this estimation error in the catch, and potentially modeling that in the MSE framework. So right now, we do not incorporate decision-making variability in the framework at all, in the simulations at all, and we do have some sources of realized variability in the framework, and we do not have any sort of observation error in there at this time. So some improvement could definitely be made for implementation variability, especially point 1 here on the decision-making part of that. Another request at SRB 17, which occurred in September 2020, was the SRB recommended continuing to work to incorporate actual estimation models. So if you remember, the results presented at AM 097 included what we called simulated estimation error. And what that means is that we're using a very simplified method to mimic the stock assessment. And it's a method that incorporates error, but it might not capture some of the nuances that a stock assessment has, such as the correlation over time, because you're just adding 1 year at a time. There might be some biases that keep it below or above for a number of years. And this simulated estimation error attempts to capture that, but it's not actually running an assessment every year. What we have been working on, and we're really close to implementing, is to actually simulate the assessment method and simulate the stock synthesis program, incorporate that into the framework, and mimic the stock assessment a little bit better. And the SRB felt, yes, that would be a really important improvement to make. We just need a little bit more work on that to make sure that we're capturing it appropriately, not only to be accurate with the past assessments, but to be representative of future assessments. The SRB has also recommended to start thinking about what might some exceptional circumstances be once a management procedure is in place. And what an exceptional circumstance is it's a defined rule. It's a defined rule that is very transparent and doesn't have judgment associated with it. And what that does is when that rule is violated in application, after this MP is in application, is it reopens the MSE to be reinvestigated. And what it does is it's telling us if the MP, the management procedure, might not be performing as we expected it to, or the stock trajectory is going in a different direction than we expected it to from our simulations. And it's just sort of a check and a way to open up the MSE process again for evaluation of management procedures without it being a more scientific method and saying, okay, it's obviously not working and we need to do something and make sure that we can fix this appropriately. And so some of the ways we might do that, or some of the exceptional circumstances we may define, are things to just simply look at the population trajectories and compare those with survey outcomes, to take a look at what the actual survey is showing us from the data, and then compare that to the MSE as we're working throughout the years in the application of this MP. And if the MSC trajectories are really beginning to deviate from what we're actually seeing in practice over the years, then that says maybe we have something incorrect and we want to revisit that evaluation. We may just look at the TCUI, and if the management procedure that's in place is producing TCUIs that are very different than what we expected, that might be an exceptional circumstance to reopen the MSE. And what we'd want to do is specifically define what is different. How different is it? And there might be other triggers, not necessarily exceptional circumstances, but there might be triggers that cause an updated MSE or an updated management procedure to be looked at. And for example, if we had a management procedure that really relied on one piece of data, and that data all of a sudden cannot be collected, well, that management procedure can't be applied. So we would really want to have to investigate a new management procedure or some drastic changes in fisheries. So basically, these are really defined circumstances in which we reopen the evaluation of the management procedures. The SRB also made some suggestions about how to present results, and this was basically ways to visualize among regulatory area trade-offs. We've incorporated that into the MSE Explorer, and I presented some of those at the annual meeting in January, last January. But it's always good to realize and to get some feedback from not only SRB, but from stakeholders and commissioners as well, on the presentation methods, and to always be improving those presentation methods, because that's really where you might say the rubber hits the road. And I'm trying to communicate with commissioners the results, and I cannot communicate effectively if my presentation style does not match your expectations of how to view these things. So I'm always looking for feedback on this and ways to improve it. So those are the pertinent SRB requests from 2020. I'll talk about a few requests that came out of SRB 18 last week after I discussed the tasks. But before doing that, I can take a quick pause if anybody has any questions before moving on to a discussion about how the MSE tasks and correspond to integration with the research that's ongoing at the IPHC. So I'll continue on. There'll be plenty of time for comments and discussion. One topic of research at IPHC is we've sort of called or labeled biological parameterization and evaluation of movement estimates. And this is very pertinent research to the management strategy evaluation and the development of operating models and the framework. This includes topics like distribution of life stages, how the stock's connected across different areas, where the stock spawns and how those spawning areas are connected, and then also understanding growth variation, which the SRB touched on how important modeling growth variation is to the MSE. This research has a lot of benefits to the management strategy evaluation in defining how recruitment occurs and where it occurs, not only where, but also over time. It also helps us define how movement occurs between the young fish and the old fish, which is extremely important to understanding distribution concepts. And then the stock structure. Are we really working with one coast-wide stock, or is there some stock structure that we should be aware of, not only in the simulation, but also maybe in defining objectives? And then finally, the modeling weighted age, which we've already touched on. So some really good research going on in this topic, and it's all informing the MSE, and I'm trying to bring it in as fast as I can, but they're really doing a lot of research quickly here. Another topic is fishery parameterization, and I'll bring in one example, but noting that we've worked extensively with the MSAB members on defining fisheries to simulate in the MSE framework, but things like discard mortality rates, what percentage of fish might not survive after release, is something that we have to make an assumption about, and that can be informed by research. So I'm just noting here that there is research currently being done, both for the commercial longline fishery as well as the recreational fisheries on better defining discard mortality rates. And that research is going to feed right back into the MSE to improve the characterization of the fisheries and the mortality caused by those fisheries. So that's some quick examples of the research and how that integrates into the MSE program of work and the tasks that we are going to discuss next. So when presenting the tasks, and there's a document associated with this presentation that has table 1. It presents all the different tasks that we thought would be useful for the MSE program of work in the next two to 3 years. And we've categorized them into objectives. These are the goals and objectives of the MSE. The management procedures, the actual procedure that is defined and how the TCUI is determined per se. The framework, which you can think of the framework as sort of the engine behind all of this, the simulation and how the pieces all come together, and basically what the Secretariat will run on their computers to produce the results. The evaluation is very important, and this is where it begins to interface with the public, the stakeholders, the commissioners, and this is in form of performance metrics, the different metrics that we'll report, and also how we present the information to you. And then finally, application, which is the actual application of the management procedure and what happens once a management procedure is put into place. In presenting these tasks, we'll present a time that it would take to complete that task. Noting that 10 is a full schedule up to IM 097, so that's the interim meeting this November. However, I do note that now it is almost the end of June, and a 10 would be definitely a very full schedule up to the interim meeting in November. There's also a total time, and that is trying to link in some of the prerequisite tasks. So for some of these tasks, like developing an operating model, which you'll see shortly, there are some other tasks that need to be done before that one can be done. And the total time so accounts for all the interlinkages and the relationships among these tasks, and saying if you want that single task done, you have to do a couple other tasks, and this is how much total time that may take. So again, realizing 10 is a full schedule up to November IM, and 20 is a full schedule up to the interim meeting in 2022. So IM 098. In the document, all these tasks are listed out in Table 1 without any prioritization. In the appendix, there's more description associated with each task. And in the appendix, they're also prioritized into high, medium, and low priority. So we'll present it here in this table, a quick summary of each task, whether it's high, medium, or low priority, its time and its total time, and then also if it relates to SRB requests, to integration with research, and you'll see there's one task that actually relates to the performance review, which I'll explain on the next slide. So in high priority tasks, we have all of these tasks that are related to the framework. And so this is really that engine behind, again, the operating models, the simulation, how the assessments mimicked, and all those other little tasks in there that are very important to the results. This includes developing migration scenarios, implementation variability, which both of those relate to SRB requests, developing a more realistic simulations of estimation error, which the SRB has requested, and then developing alternative operating models, which the SRB is related to SRB and research integration. So I note here something like developing alternative operating models, which is labeled F.5. That requires looking at migration scenarios, because that is really a main part of developing these alternative operating models, is to incorporate the uncertainty in movement of Pacific halibut. So For that, you notice the total time is a bit greater than the time just to do that task of alternative operating models. And the total time is accounting for the relationship with F1, or developing migration scenarios. And I have a figure on a few slides from now that tries to explain the linkages a little bit more. But I want to note these are all high priority because, one, they all relate to SRB requests, but more importantly, these are all very important to improve the robustness of the MSE. So improving these tasks here will give everyone more confidence that the results are robust to all of the uncertainty we have. The next set of MSE tasks are all medium priority. And these include a number of different management procedures and a couple other framework tasks that would be important, but might not be as important as the high priority tasks. So they would improve, a few things. So time-varying parameters could improve the robustness of the results. But things like improving framework code just mean that the code that we have developed here is cleaner, can be adopted by other people, can be used by other people, and modified by other people in the future. And that's just, just cleaning it up and making it more usable and efficient. The last F.7 framework task there, modeling length at age, that is really, right now, the model just converts the numbers to weight directly through a weight at age relationship. And so it's not modeling length specifically, because we use that in the size limits, and it's made some assumptions about how to incorporate discard mortality rates or discard mortality due to size limits. But if we really want to investigate a management procedure related to size limits, such as M.1 at the top, we probably want to model lengths specifically and not use that assumption that is currently being done in the simulations. And so you can see that F.7 at the bottom and M.1 are really intrinsically linked together. And that's why the total time for M.1, investigation of size limits, is quite lengthy, because it incorporates not only doing all that investigation of those management procedures, but it incorporates the time to incorporate length at age modeling in the assessment or in the simulations. And that would be quite lengthy because we really don't have an assessment that models length specifically, and it would require a lot of research to make sure that that is done correctly. So some of the other management procedures that we could investigate, and I'll start actually at the bottom of this list with M.5, and that is to basically take the results that we have seen already at AMO97 and continue with that momentum and evaluate maybe a couple new or refined management procedures that incorporate the scale and distribution elements. So for example, if you recall at AMO97, the sort of final results was there were two management procedures that stood out, MPD and MPJ. I won't describe what they are, but they're very different management procedures, and perhaps they could be combined in some way and taken both of the good performing elements from them and see how they perform with those elements combined. So we can do things like that, or we can come up with brand new management procedures with scale and distribution elements, operating under the current paradigm of this SPR-based approach. Moving up into M.4, we could investigate management procedures related to non-directed discard mortality. Although we have not done that yet, we are currently simulating non-directed discard mortality as more of a scenario, is what we call it, and we're just trying to capture the uncertainty in the simulations of non-directed discard mortality to develop management procedures that are robust to that uncertainty. M.3 is to take a look at multi-year assessments, and this is a really interesting one. The performance review of IPHC a couple of years ago highlighted this as a recommendation. And what this means is not doing a real assessment every year that provides management advice, but maybe doing that every second or third year to give time for more research in developing the assessment, And in the interim, maybe have a more simple management procedure that helps make those TCY decisions or provides the advice for the commission to make those TCY decisions. And so there's a lot of benefits to multi-year assessments. It might introduce some stability between that 2 to 3 year period, but that stability, as we've seen in simulations that I did a couple of years ago, it's stable for 2 to 3 years, but then all of a sudden you might have a big jump in that second or third year. So I think some evaluation of multi-year assessments would be useful, and it was also recommended by the performance review. And then M.2 is survey-based management procedures. This has been recommended by the SRB and also brought up in the MSAB as management procedures that are of interest. What these are management procedures that are more empirically based or based more on direct data rather than passing that data through a stock assessment, integrating all sorts of data sources to get out, these decision tables and all those things. An example of a survey-based management procedure might be something like if the survey biomass in this regulatory area is going down, the TCY goes down, and you have some defined relationship, and you can tune that and do some investigation on that. So those are the management procedures that we feel are the categories of management procedures that we feel would be useful to investigate. And I do note it's not really possible to investigate all of these in a thorough manner. We could, but it'd only be able to do a couple from each one. So picking a few, 1, 2, or 3 from this task list might be more reasonable for us to provide a thorough evaluation. And then finally, the final set of tasks here are what we categorize as low priority. And basically they're low priority because a lot of work has been done on these right now, or it's not really maybe the right time to really begin thinking fully about these. And so, for example, we've done a lot of work on objectives, and we've defined sustainability objectives, and we've defined fishery objectives. We have a really good set of objectives that I think we're working with. We might be able to add a few more, and we might have some discussions about those. But right now, that's something that can be done potentially at a later stage, even, not this year, but maybe next year. Other tasks are related to the evaluation. And this, again, is the interface between me and you, how I'm presenting the results to the commission and how the commission views those results and can play with those results if they wish. So E.1 is the development of conservation and fishery performance metrics, which we have developed those related to those objectives. But there are also, we found there are other metrics that might be of interest to certain groups, certain stakeholders, certain commissioners to look at specifically that are not related to the primary objectives. I think the MSE Explorer, that online tool that we have to look at the results, it has over 200 performance metrics in it currently, but part of that is because there are 8 different regulatory areas, and a single performance metric might be reported 8 times for each regulatory area, and there's also measures of uncertainty and all those other things. But we just want to make sure that we're covering everybody's interest in what metrics are. And related to that is potentially adding in economic performance metrics. Basha here at IPHC, Dr. Hutnisak, has done a lot of great work on the economic study, and bringing in the human dimension would be, we could use these to bring in that human dimension. There's a lot of great work she's doing, a lot of visualization techniques she's incorporated. And I think it would be really worth thinking about how some economic performance metrics might be reported in the management strategy evaluation. One example where we've already seen some use of economic performance metrics was in the recent size limit analyses that were presented at AMO 97. Again, these were looks at size limit in the short term. So given the conditions of today, what would a size limit or no size limit, what would the effect likely look like? And we saw, I think it was something like some percentage, I can't remember exactly, I don't want to misquote it, but you would increase yield by some percentage by removing the size limit from the fishery. However, what we did find is that there's a trade-off between what is the value to the fishery and what is the price point at which these smaller halibut need to get to make that value worthwhile. And so bringing in that sort of economic look on these results might be helpful to understand those trade-offs between value and yield. And that would require a little bit of work, some integration with Dr. Hutnazak, and some thinking about exactly how to link the MSE with the economic metrics that she already is producing. And then finally, E.3 is just how to present the results and thinking of novel ways and new ways and working with stakeholders and commissioners on ways they would like to have the results presented. The final category, application, is where those exceptional circumstances fit in. And this would be, again, looking at what exceptional circumstances would be defined when a management procedure is put in place that would trigger a reevaluation and a redo of the MSE to make sure that we're still on track with our expectations. And this would be something that we would work with the SRB on. We would work with the MSAB, and we would also work with commissioners to make sure that we have really clear, transparent, and non-judgmental circumstances defined. So those are all of the tasks that we have listed in this draft program of work. And again, noting that these are to be chosen from. We couldn't do this whole list of tasks in the next 2-year period. But I wanted to present briefly some of the linkages between these tasks. So as you noted, I'll back up one slide here. As you noted in the tables, we've had this ID on the left column with its sort of category and then a number within the category. And we've put that number here within these categories of framework, application, objectives and evaluation, and the management procedures, and then a brief description to hopefully jog your memory what that number or ID might mean. And overlapping, these are Venn diagrams, you might call them, but when a circle overlaps, that means it has some linkage between those circles. I didn't try to make it so the circle size means anything or the amount of overlap means anything, so don't get too interpretive of this, but just look at what overlaps and what doesn't overlap. So, for example, F.6, the framework, sits in the middle there, and that's that task of just improving the framework. And what you can see is that any of these tasks besides F.5 would improve the framework because I would be coding in it, I would be adding things to it, and we would just be in general improving the simulation framework and thinking about the ways to do this. Those are things like estimation error models, modeling length at age, time varying. And what you can see down here on the left in F.5 are the OMs, or the developing alternative OMs. And those operating models are really, you can think of an operating model as our view of the stock and how that stock is going to be simulated in these in the MSE. And things like that go into that are migration assumptions, time varying parameters. And so you see those tests, F1 and F4, have overlap with developing the alternative operating models. And they would really, the migration one is one that is required for the operating models. I did color them by priority. So the red circles are high priority, the green circles are medium priority, and the blue circles are the low priority tasks. In our classification, you may want to classify them differently. So you can see things like modeling length at age, F.7 has an arrow to size limits showing that's a direct link between those two. And F.7 doesn't really have much linkage to other tasks that we feel would be extremely useful. We could incorporate it and do all these simulations with length at age, but we don't feel it's really a high priority and necessity at this time. You can see the management procedures are pretty much independent of each other. They're just defining those different types of management procedures. We have application on its own. It's the only task under there. And then some relationship between the objectives and evaluation. And basically, performance metrics are defined by the objectives, at least the primary ones, although we might define additional performance metrics not associated with objectives. We have economic performance metrics, which could be defined by some objectives related to the fishery. And then finally, the presentation of the results is related to those performance metrics. So hopefully, I mean, these all do overlap. The MSE is one integrated product that incorporates all these things, but hopefully this provides a little bit more linkage between the different tasks and what might be required. So for example, if the commission is really interested in increasing the robustness of these simulations by incorporating reasonable amounts of uncertainty in the simulations, they might be interested in F.5, developing alternative operating models, which would then necessitate the migration of F1 and potentially some time-varying parameters, introducing some time-varying parameters, which I have some ideas for in how to do that as well. So I wanted to conclude the presentation with a couple of concepts or notes that came out of SRB 18, which is just last week. We had a really, really good discussion with the SRB about the MSE process, where it's been, where it's at, and where it's going. One thing that the SRB really wanted to highlight was they all agreed that the MSE is a useful tool to prioritize research topics. And this is a concept or a ability of MSE that we haven't really talked about at IPHC. I've done at other agencies, but it's using the MSE to have a look at what sorts of research might really increase the or enhance the management of the stock, what sorts of data collection would improve the ability to manage the stock, and what sort of models, estimation models, would improve the ability to manage the stock. But this is really associated with the research, like doing migration research, doing maturity research. What types of research would improve the management performance at IPHC? And the MSE is a really powerful tool to do those sorts of things. Discussing that with the SRB, we realized it just needs a little bit more work on those framework aspects, especially those high priority tasks identified here, for it to be a tool that's really ready to do that. And currently at IPHC, we're developing a 5-year program of integrated science and research. And the SRB noted that they felt that the MSE framework could, maybe in this next 5-year program of science and research, it could be developed more to be ready to use as a tool when we define or write or define the next 5-year program of integrated science and research. So in the next 5 years, continue developing the framework such that in the 5 to 10-year outlook from here, that MSE framework can be an integrated part of defining what science and research is useful to IPHC. And then the SRB requested that the IPHC Secretariat prioritize tasks for this MSE program of work that lead to adoption of a well-defined management procedure. And we had a lot of discussion about the progress that has been made on the MSE, and a lot of progress has been made. And I feel really good about that progress, and I feel we're really close. We've done a lot of evaluation. We've all learned a lot about the performance of the management at IPHC, what works and what doesn't work, and we're learning a lot about what the objectives of the fishery as well as of conservation are at IPHC. And so we're really close to there to coming up with a well-defined management procedure that might meet those objectives and trade off between all of the different objectives. So I note here that the current interim agreements stated in past reports at the IPHC are due to expire in 2023. And so potentially having a well-defined management procedure or an evaluation to choose from, to choose a management procedure from, may be useful in 2023 so that we can have something in place and begin working on other research at IPHC. And that was a discussion we had with the SRB, and they felt it was really important to sort of just tie up this work that's currently been done. So given that SRB requests, we identify on this slide a number of tasks that would assist in the adoption of an management procedure, MP, by 2023. And I have here listed 4 different framework tasks, F1, 2, 3, and 5, with a description on the right there. And that is basically the high priority tasks, the migration scenarios, implementation variability, estimation area, and then defining those alternative operating models. And really, this would just provide a really robust evaluation of any management procedure that you wish. M.5 is looking at additional management procedures related to scale and distribution, sort of that current paradigm we've already been investigating. And our thought there is we've already learned so much that we just have a little bit more work to do, and potentially we can come up with a management procedure that does meet everyone's objectives, or at least trades off between those objectives appropriately. M2 and M3, there is a lot of interest to investigate more simple, empirically based management procedures or multi-year assessments. There's a lot of interest in that, and that is something we can do. I do note that for the last round of simulations, we did do some simulations with multi-year assessments. We didn't really present them, but they are available in MSc Explorer. And so it's sort of that initial look at there. So I don't think M.3 would be a lot of work to implement. It's just, a matter of doing the runs and summarizing all the data. That's the time-consuming part. Especially now that we have this tool built, we can start doing that type of work. And then finally, some tasks related to evaluation are, we're always working on presentation of the results. That's sort of a given, E.3. But thinking more and working with the various stakeholders and commissioners about the performance metrics that are useful to present, including the integration with any economic performance metrics. So noting these tasks, and those last evaluation ones, I think the MSAB is what really where I was most impressed with them was their ability to evaluate multiple management procedures and to really help the IPHC Secretariat see which management procedures might perform best according to all their diverse objectives, but to help narrow down the set of performance metrics instead of me, and I'll speak specifically for me, I tend to want to look at a lot of different things, and they help keep my scope narrow. So thinking about that, we did not actually have an MSAB meeting in May, which was, bittersweet for me. I was able to get some other work that I'd been falling behind on done, and catch up on a little bit of the framework and a lot of the work that Dr. Carpi, Piera, had done at IPHC and make sure I'm familiar with what she had done. So that was good from that standpoint, but it also means that I have not continued to learn from the stakeholders on what's important to them. And so I've been thinking a little bit about something like this. If we were to adopt a program of work like this, where would the MSAB fit in? And I feel like, having that May meeting and being a really short May meeting, just to sort of a check-in with stakeholders to make sure that we're on the right track, and then potentially having a longer meeting in October 2022 to go over the results, have stakeholders understand what we've done, and I think it helps them when they go to the commission meetings to be able to present their sort of evaluation of the MSE as well, without it all being a big surprise to them. So in terms of an MSAB meeting, and I just bring this up thinking ahead a little bit, I think a program of work like this might be where I just put my head down and I bring in all the IPHC Secretariat and we just collaborate in the way we do here and get a lot of really good work done on developing the robust framework. And then in 2022, start bringing in the public and the stakeholders to help refine, the management procedures and how we're going to evaluate those management procedures. Just some thoughts of mine on a potential course of action in the future for the MSAB. So that brings me to the end here. Just want the commission to note this paper, and thanks for listening to me this morning. To recommend, the connection of the MSE with the economics. I think this is a really good way to look at the usefulness of the economics analysis, and this is a way to sort of integrate it within the management. And then to recommend and prioritize tasks for the program of work so that here at IPHC Secretariat, we can get to work on that and provide the commission with what they need to make their decisions in the future. So thank you very much.
Peter, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Alan, for the great presentation there. Can we just look at, I have a couple questions, but first, can we look at slide number 6? Sorry. So I understand the SRB is requesting to looking at the decision-making variability, but I was just curious what your thoughts are around if there is an agreement around distribution. Is it useful to have this when there was so many years where there was some contention over other issues or on agreements in the past? And yeah, it seems to me that the agreements tend to stabilize the decision making, and it sort of shows that through the 2019 and the 2021 decisions. And just your thoughts on that?
A great question, and we did have a bit of that discussion with the SRB, and mainly this is a sort of retrospect or historical look at decision-making variability. And as you've noted, some agreements have been made recently. There's been changes in the actual harvest policy. So it's hard to characterize whether this type of variability shown in the plot would even continue into the future. And as you mentioned, if we do adopt a management procedure, there are many fisheries agencies, and an example are many tuna fisheries. Another example is the sablefish fishery in Canada, where they have adopted a management procedure that makes the decision-making process really quick and simple because they follow the management procedure. And so that would actually rid of any sort of decision-making variability. But I think at the IPHC, there's still an appetite for that last decision step. And I don't have that plot which shows, the scale, distribution, and then decision-making, the commission process. But I think there's always going to be some negotiation or some room for flexibility at that final step during the annual meeting. And although, to be honest, on the coast-wide level, I don't think this is a huge departure from the management procedures, but I think it's an important amount of variability to characterize in the future. So given that we're not even really sure what sort of variability in the decision-making process might happen next year or 5 years or 10, 20, 40 years into the future, that the way that I would go about this is to try to characterize a reasonable amount of decision-making variability. Do some simulations without that variability. So you can see if we followed the management procedure, which are all the results that have been showing thus far. If we followed the management procedure, this is the outcomes. And then to contrast that with maybe some different levels of decision-making variability to help the commissioners understand. It's like, okay, if we deviate too much, that's going to have a big effect on the outcomes of here. And we might actually need to choose a different management procedure if we want that flexibility. So it's basically going to be a way to look at the effects with and without decision-making variability, and does it change the decision of the best performing management procedure? And if it doesn't, then you know you have a very robust management procedure that would account for that type of variability. And if it does, you can choose one that has more robustness, for example. So that's how we would present it in that sense. Does that answer everything your question? I know there are a few points in there.
I was curious as to how you would take information from the recent past and how that would, you know, if decision information in is different, or just the reasons people make decisions are different, how you know. But I guess what you're trying to say is you're trying to characterize some sort of uncertainty there and put it in, and that kind of adds to a little bit one other aspect of that, because the reality is you talked about what the actual mortality was versus what was adopted, and maybe some of that is some of that variability may be realizing that people don't actually catch the full mortality. So would those two, the decision-making variability and the realized variability, would they be integrated in together?
You might have cut out at the very end there, but I get the point you're making, is that yeah, right now I have been thinking of them as independent, but you know, there could be some interaction between them if there is a decision to, and here's a hypothetical example. Let's say the decision is to depart from the management procedure and set a quota or a limit very low, that there might be realized in reality, the mortality that occurs in the fishery might be above that limit because it was set as such a low value. So that's a potential case, but I think for now in the simulations, I would keep them pretty much independent of each other. I think the fisheries are very well behaved here, and the realized variability is much more, I'm going to make up a word, simulatable, meaning in my language that you can simulate it. And I think we can simulate realized variability much easier than we can simulate decision-making variability. So if I may, given that, we just incorporate some sort of realized variability. But as I mentioned, that decision-making variability, we're going to look more specifically at the effects of various levels of decision-making variability so that we can understand its effect. Rather than realized variability, we're just going to include it as a source of variation, if that makes sense.
IP4, the non-directed discard mortality, and you had talked that it was the implementation variability you're looking at, so the uncertainty that in the numbers that you have. Would that not be categorized as this perceived variability?
It could, and I think we haven't discussed this, and I haven't put a lot of thought into how to bring in this perceived variability, this observation error, into the simulations. There's sort of two ways to think about this. One, the more simple way is that the numbers that go into the stock assessment are observed numbers, and we may want to and just simply simulate some sort of error before they go into the stock assessment to provide, you know, that assessment and that management advice. But the second part of this is that in development of a management procedure, if there is some sort of observation error in certain areas or certain fleets, that we might want to have some feedback in a management procedure that relates to the amount of observation error in there. I'm not sure if that's reasonable or something that is desired at IPHC, but it is a way, and I think right now we do have one of the agreements in place is mitigation for U26 bycatch, and I believe some of that is related to observation error. But again, I haven't put a whole lot of thought into it, but this could relate to a management procedure I am thinking more of it in the sense of the simulation and what goes into the simulation of a stock assessment, though.
Additional hands up. Alan, if I may, Alan did have one question for you, and that is
Okay.
concerning management procedure. I believe it's M and the size limits. Um, two aspects of that, I guess, that I had a question about. One is, I think in your Venn diagram chart, you had noted that there is a relationship between that and F7,
Mhm.
and also noting that you were just on, sorry, full
This
time
one here.
required to evaluate this is looking at 10 to 20 units, which could take us, I think, at a fully complete to second interim meeting, if I'm calculating correctly. There's also the shorter time period, and I'm curious as to whether or not if the MSAB were to look at this issue specifically, whether some progress could be made that could be informative to the commission for this upcoming 2022 annual meeting, whether or not there would be continued work that we would be able to visit, not all that work be completed in that time frame.
Yeah, and we have been thinking about an evaluation of size limits using the MSE within the Secretariat here. I do note, though, it is a bit of a lengthy process just because even if we were not to model length at age in the simulations and to omit F7, it would still be a lengthy process in defining how size is modeled within the simulation framework. And that would be through various assumptions and relating size to age and or weight in some way. And so it would be a simplifying assumption, and that would still take some time. So we could make some progress on size limits potentially by or for the annual meeting in 2022, the next annual meeting. But I don't know that it would be a real, robust analysis, and it would also take away time from potentially some of the other high priority tasks that have been defined here. So that's the trade-offs here, and that's why we put in the time column is if we were to investigate size limits, that would probably mean looking back here at the high priority task, not doing implementation variability and not doing estimation error at least, and maybe just doing a little bit of research on migration scenarios and hopefully develop another alternative operating model, but focusing in on this management procedure given the framework that we currently have. Now, I know I don't want it to sound like the current simulations that we have are not robust. They are robust. It's just we haven't fully tested them against a wide range of potential hypotheses, of which some of those hypotheses might be really far-fetched, but we want to test the management procedure against those far-fetched hypotheses. Like whoever thought that more than half of the biomass of Pacific cod would end up in the northern Bering Sea. Those sorts of things, just to test the robustness of these. But I think we have a tool that is very useful and could do something like the size limits evaluation relatively quickly. I'm just not fully satisfied the tool is complete at this time, and I don't think the SRB is as well, and they were looking forward to a little bit more development on that end.
to the research going on that would better understand survival, is that for both the directed fishery and the not directed fishery, such as the Amendment 80 fleet's release of halibut in the Bering Sea and that potential survival? So that's my first question. Is it more than just one gear type you're looking at?
Secretariat are not doing any research on non-directed discard mortality rates. That research has been done by other agencies, and there's been a paper published in the last couple of years that took a really good look at those discard mortality rates and came up with some good estimates. So there is some work being done on that, not specifically at IPHC, although we do have involvement with that research on the non-directed fleets. What research is being done by the IPHC is we've recently completed some tagging research on and to look at discard mortality rates in the commercial longline fleet. We have a paper in draft that will be coming out. I did the analysis for that paper, and it showed that our discard mortality, our current assumption of discard mortality rates is it is similar to what the results of this research has shown us. And it's also going to help us define additional research in the future. Additional fleet is the recreational fleet, and this is a relatively new investigation. They have been going out. I think they just got back from another tagging episode, catching a bunch of halibut off charter boats. And they are doing some satellite tagging and some coded wire tagging, I believe. And we should start getting results from that at the end of this year. And I imagine an analysis will be done early next year on that, looking at discard mortality rates based on different release types within the recreational fisheries. So it just helps us. We have some current assumptions about what percentage of fish die after release based on their injury codes. And this is to verify that those assumed percentages are accurate and to use data to actually back up those percentages. But as I said, in the non-directed fleet, that research has been done by other agencies with our cooperation and collaboration. And a paper had been published, I think 2 or 3 years ago on that provided a lot of insight into the new classifications of discard mortality rates used by the North Pacific Council.
Okay, thank you for that. And then I have one last question, Glenn. You mentioned, Dr. Hicks, that you might be looking at monitoring procedures that might fail in the future. So you're looking at options of. Can you give us an example where that has occurred or what you might be looking at?
Circumstances that really define when a management procedure might fail, or when our MSE simulations are just maybe not indicative of the future. And so what we might do, let's say we put in a management procedure in 2021, we might define an exceptional circumstance that says, well, if the TCY from this management procedure falls below 25 million pounds, then we want to reopen up the MSE evaluations because the MSE evaluation said there's a very low probability that it would fall below 25 million pounds. So it's sort of that linkage between what the MSE simulations tell us is going to happen in the future and what we actually experience, say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now in the actual future. And if those MSE results that we expected in 5 years are very different than the data show us in 5 years, that might be seen as a departure or a failure, as you put it. And we just want to define circumstances so that we can't have those arguments. It's like, oh, the TCY, the MSE said it would be 35 and it's actually 34. We need to open up the MSE. That becomes more judgmental, and rather what the SRB suggested is using empirical data that suggest defining really clear circumstances in which these management procedures would be reevaluated. Does that help?
Yes, it does. So thank you, Dr. Hicks and Glenn.
Thank you, and thank you, Dr. Hicks, for the presentation. I just had a couple questions of clarification at this point. So looking at the time estimates, I'm thinking about the changes in the Secretariat's capacity around MSE with Dr. Karpy and Dr. Barakoff, their departures, and also just that some time has passed since you had presented this to us at the annual meeting. And so I guess it's a bit of like a stress test question for you, and thinking about what are we positioned to do this work between now and the IM, and kind of what the resources are to do the work. And if that means you're sleeping under your desk a few nights a week. So just curious to sort of press that a little bit, and I guess find out if you've given some thought to whether some of these time estimates account for the fact that we are now in mid-June.
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner Davis. That is a great question, and the time estimates here were developed in February, and we have not changed those time estimates to account for the amount of time in June. So, these tasks would be a considerable amount of work over the summer, what I've been calling over the summer. But to be honest, I really was thinking about this in terms of my working schedule, was to catch up in that March-April timeframe with a lot of work that I had fallen behind on. And then to begin this work, even these tasks, if we had this meeting earlier, would be mainly summer tasks. So I would say we're maybe a month behind what I originally thought might be happening. Related to the resources at IPHC, I think we're very well set up, and that was during this process, the Secretariat and myself in conversations with Dr. Wilson, we were very aware of the fact that Dr. Barakoff and Dr. Karpy were under contract, and those contracts were end. So the real goal there was to use their time as efficiently as possible to set up an MSE product that could be easily used to do tasks like this in the future. And I think we've done a really good job at that. As I've noticed with some of the high priority framework tasks, there's still a little bit more work to be done. But I think we're very well placed to have this fantastic tool now in our toolbox that we can do all sorts of different things with. And so given that, I think, just the resources of the quantitative group here is we're well set up to perform many of these tasks. As I mentioned, it's nice to go in and clean up the code so that anybody new coming in can understand it quickly. That's always a good thing to do, and of course we'll be doing that as we find the time available. But to really get a task done in a program of work, I don't think it would be a big ask. And then furthermore on that is, these high priority tasks are really to develop a more robust product. We already have a robust product, but it would just be to add those extra layers, those few extra layers of some different hypotheses, some wider range of scenarios, just to make sure that it's going to, that any sort of management procedure we're testing is very robust to all the range of hypotheses we have here. So I see it now as we're now improving the framework, and the framework is there and able to do any of these management procedure simulations shown in the medium priority. Of course, that is work to do, but it's work that I do enjoy doing. And to be honest, with 2 young kids at home, there might be a few nights I don't mind sleeping under my desk at home. So I do like to do this work, and I don't see, as you said, it's a stress test. I'm not getting stressed about it because I know the tool is already there. What I got stressed about is building the tool such that it would work. Now I know it works and I'm improving it, and that makes my life much more enjoyable, you might say.
Is F1 and are F1 and F2 more important to make progress on before proceeding to F3 and F5? Is there any sort of higher ranking within those high priority topics?
I think we already have for F3, we already have a system in place, or an estimation error in place that seems to work reasonably well and provide robustness. And again, it would just be a better way of doing what we're already doing. Implementation variability, it's important, but it is something, again, with the discussion with Commissioner DeGrief, is it would be looked at in sort of a way of, here it is without that decision-making variability, and here it is with. And then really the highest priority is to develop some alternative migration scenarios, to work with the research team and work with others here at the Secretariat, and just develop those range of hypotheses. And given that, ranking F.1, I would rank F.5 at the same level as F.1, because the real goal of F.1 is to inform the development of alternative operating models. So I guess F.5 would be ranked the highest, with a real close ranking of F.1, and then below that are 2 and 3.
On that quite a bit, and she's no longer with the IPHC. So I'm just curious, whom is doing the work? Are you doing the work, or is someone else doing the work?
Existence of IPHC. It's going to be fantastic. It's been reviewed, and she's just already made the replies back in that review, and it should be published, I think, very soon. So she's still working on that, which is great for her, but it'll help her in her publications as well. So I think she'll be able to tie up that research that she was doing. In terms of the real research, no, I cannot claim that I'm doing that. That is more the biological and ecosystem branch here at IPHC, Joseph's group, or Dr. Planis's group. We have Lori Sidoris been working on this a lot, and others within there. Dr. Lower has been doing a lot of tagging studies and things like that, and definitely helped out with that. So I would rely heavily on that group to inform me about migration, and then that would help me and the quantitative group here, quantitative sciences group, to develop those migration scenarios. What are hypotheses about movement? Do we even include a hypothesis that the larvae settle and then they never move. That's probably not plausible. So we can rule that out. But how much movement is occurring, and that's where we would rely on the biological and ecosystem sciences branch here. So no, I'm not doing that research. They're doing that research and informing us and developing the scenarios, which are then translated into operating models.
Just, I guess, a few additional comments. So yes, in terms of the current MSc program of work, just to reiterate what Dr. Hicks has indicated, it's been developed based on our current human resources and financial resources available to us. And that took into consideration, as Dr. Hicks had said, that Dr. Brukoff's contract ended about a year or so ago, and Dr. Karpi's contract ended earlier this year, and there was no financial additional money available to extend that contract at this time. And so the work program that you're seeing at the moment takes into consideration all of those components. Regarding the migration work, as Dr. Hicks has indicated, we really are moving into other ways of looking into migration studies and looking at connectivity between potential subpopulations for Pacific halibut. And Dr. Blanes is initiating a project specifically involving genetics, so the close-kin marker capture techniques, where we will try and continue with that migration work to feed into both the MSc work but also the stock assessment work in the future. And so that's the new path where we're taking it in that regard. Other than that, I think we do have a couple of questions or comments from stakeholders. So just Chair, just when you are ready, we can certainly switch to those once commissioners are finished. Thank you, Chair. Comment PowerPoint, please. It might just take a moment or two to have that uploaded, so just take a... Okay, less time than I thought it would. Don't intend on reading this to any great extent. Chris, did you want to have the microphone to make the intervention yourself? You could just test your microphone, Chris.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Dr. Wilson. Thank you for the presentation, Dr. Hicks. I just had some comments just that I'd like to bring forward. Speaking as a member of the MSAB, I think we need objectives or direction or a decision from commissioners on distribution before we continue to make progress at future meetings. I think our last meeting was really starting to stall out over that. And I know that while objectives may be or a lower priority for the MSc team, and I use the word team, but I'm not sure it's still a team, but they're a key priority for the process overall, and the gap to be addressed is defining an objective about distribution or allocation. And I think that slide 6 of Dr. Hicks's presentation indicated, to me at least, that adopted TCUIs may be more likely to be closer to the management procedure TCUIs when there's an agreement in place for distributing the coast-wide TCUI. So I think objectives or direction or decision about distribution, it's complex, it will take time. Therefore, I think the MSc team should focus on the technical aspects of the proposed program of work. I would say as an MSAB member, I'd be interested in some aspects of those technical pieces. I don't know I'd have a lot to add, but for instance, on migration, I'd be interested to know what scenarios are being looked at and why. I don't think I'd have much to add to the discussion. I'd just be interested to be kept abreast of what's being done. I do think that a new program of work item needs to be added to refine the current management procedure ranking process. The current process had some flaws, and I think the MSAB needs to have the opportunity to discuss, develop, and agree to a new management procedure ranking process. And last comment I'd make is I do not support the recommendation to connect MSE with the economic output from the multi-regional economic impact assessment. It's not needed to understand the outcomes and the implications from the MSE. I think it will just serve as another statistic of interest that could unnecessarily confound the discussions and could end up being used to try to rationalize positions on distribution or allocation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sporer, and I'll turn to see if there are any questions from commissioners, which I don't see at the moment. And Dr. Wilson, is that the only public comment that we received?
That's correct. That's the only comment or question we've received publicly. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson. So given that, what is the will of the commission at this time in terms of providing some additional guidance concerning the MSC work plan?
Dr. Hicks has presented, and I guess we're looking at agreement or endorsement or a recommendation from the Commission to move those forward between now and well, over the next couple of years. And so Dr. Hicks has put slide 22 up on the screen, and as I said, what we're essentially asking for feedback or a commitment from the Commission is to recommend the tasks that are outlined in very broadly in that table on the right on the slide. And look, I'll pass to Dr. Hicks just to walk us through those one more time, just to get clarity around precisely what you need from the commissioners. So through the chair, over to you, Dr. Hicks.
On F5 is highest priority within the high priority, and then 2 and 3 falling slightly below that. In terms of management procedures, this is probably where we're really looking towards the commission to provide some direction to the Secretariat. And what is the commission's priority and types of management procedures they would like to evaluate? And those are M5, the current sort of paradigm we've been operating under, this SPR-based approach with scale and distribution components. Is there interest in looking at multi-year assessments? So something more simple, even just the mortality limit set for 2-year periods in between those assessment years. And then M.2 are more empirically based management procedures. We don't need to discuss here at this time what exactly those are, but is the commission interested in the Secretariat going away and investigating or coming up with types of empirical management procedures to evaluate? And then finally, the last section there of the evaluation sections, the E's, that is, does the commission feel that the current set of performance metrics is working for them, that they do get enough information from those to evaluate their objectives and evaluate the trade-offs between various objectives? Is there interest in bringing in these economic metrics and the vast amount of work that Dr. Hutniczak has put together in the last couple of years? It's really, really fascinating work. And then E.3 is where I think where Chris Sporer was mentioning this ranking process, I think that does actually fall within the presentation of results. And presentation of results is something, as I said, I'm always interested in. But if there are certain aspects in how these results are being presented, the commission can certainly provide direction to the secretariat, realizing that we chose one method of ranking these in sort of a last minute, and it would be useful to look at different ways of presenting a summary of a multitude of management procedures and a multitude of performance metrics, and narrowing it down to maybe a smaller set of management procedures quickly if we're looking at, say, 10 to 20, maybe even 30 different management procedures. So that's a summary there, and as I said, the real direction we're looking from the commission is, should the secretariat be putting more into the technical details, what types of management procedures, and then do they have any suggestions how we present the results? To June, and then back calculated, realizing the annual meeting's 7 months from now. There's that stress test, Commissioner Davis. But I think in terms of my timeline, I am really thinking of this as a program of work for 2021 and 2022, where, say, for the remainder of this year would be, if we were to adopt this entire set of tasks here, I think the MSE team, and there is a team here, we certainly work together at the Secretariat within the quantitative group and elsewhere. We would be investigating a lot about just improving the framework and having that robust evaluation, and potentially coming back with a few additional management procedures that the commission might find useful. You may provide direction that says, take those 11, reevaluate those 11 management procedures that have already been evaluated with this more robust framework, and bring those back to us, and then we'll provide further guidance on additional management procedures at the annual meeting in 2022. But I really see it as a 1.5-year time frame, where what are we going to bring in 2023, which I believe is annual meeting 99 at that point. So it is a bit longer time frame. I don't know that there's well, for 2022, it would be a big push to bring back anything really new, unless the direction is keep the current framework as it is and investigate these types of management procedures.
Yes, I have a couple thoughts. I think about the way that the MSAB discussions have unfolded insofar as I understand it, in the context of some of this more management procedure oriented work. And you is I don't think that what we most need right now is additional management procedures. I don't think that's what's kind of hanging us up from being able to make a decision as commissioners about the distribution and allocation question, so much as the opportunity for commissioners to sort of work with all of the excellent work that Alan, you and your team and the MSAB have done to put something in front of us that can inform those discussions. So with respect to the management procedures piece, I feel like the step there is for us to work as commissioners with the information we have and see if we can find agreement. And so my view would be that these technical pieces, when taken together, are actually a fair bit of work. I didn't quite do the math, but I think it's like a year or two. Those will serve us well. They sound like they will support future discussions, irrespective of where things may land regarding management procedures. And so that's where I would like to see us focus the work of the kind of main pieces or chunks that are proposed here on this slide. I think the other piece that we have talked about somewhat within amongst ourselves is the importance of maintaining a kind of connection of this work. If the focus were to be technical, how do we continue to keep people sort of aware and up to speed with the MSE work that is going on, and keep the MSAB reasonably kind of attuned to that, so that when in the future we bring them more back into the equation, we're not sort of starting them cold. So that would be another consideration for me, is thinking about that kind of more process or communication piece that would accompany the work we do moving forward, if it is to be technically oriented with maybe a little less scope for stakeholder input. And then just a final point about the items under E. I think there was an interest in this kind of presentation of results as you have provided as part of that communication and engagement effort. I think that is something that that will really be of interest and probably serve us all in terms of enabling some informed discussion about the results over time. So thank you.
What the work you're doing, and make sure that people follow along. I know the MSAB. I've sat in on a few mini meetings, and many bright minds there. That really understand this stuff and really can delve into it. But as a fisherman, there's a reason I'm a fisherman. Sometimes it's a little harder for myself, and I think it's important to just always be cognizant of how to present this in a way that some of the laymen can understand it a little better and bring them along, as it is a stakeholder buy-in and process as well. So I just wanted to make those comments, as well as in just what you had said about ranking. It's probably important to also have a ranking system kind of in place before you have the results, so people understand how to interpret the results before. So, thank you.
Appears to be as well interest in also making some progress on M3 multi-year assessments. There also is some interest in continuing the work of moving forward with the presentation of results and ensuring that the products that we're producing are understandable and usable by the public as they consider these issues. The other topic that has come up in the past of some interest, and I think it's a little bit more uncertain where that lies in terms of our priorities, is M1, which is related to size limits. That had been an issue of discussion in the past. That may be something that I think could be of some interest moving forward. But I'm not quite sure whether or not that continues to be a priority for other commissioners, and or if that feeds into some of the issues that you raised, Commissioner Davis, in terms of providing an opportunity for the MSAB to tackle a management issue that may be of some interest. So I'll pause there to see if there's reaction or thoughts concerning that general characterization of where there may be some interest among the other commissioners. And I think Commissioner Alverson, you were up first.
Management procedures was the opinion the same on both of those, F5 and M5, that those were maybe not needed or needed to focus on? Secondly, I'm still interested in the size limit issue. So those are my comments, Glenn. I think Mr. Davis made some comment about F5 and M5.
Thanks, Bob. Commissioner Royale?
Yeah, thanks, Glenn. I was on mute. So, based upon the presentation from Alan today, it has changed my thinking a little bit from when we met previously. But I think, when I say previously, we as commissioners did meet previously to go over the work plan that Alan has presented today. And I think, Glenn, we jointly recognized there was a need for the technical pieces, and we had kind of focused on F1 and 2, but based upon the presentation that Alan's provided today, this slide 22 identifies F1, 2, 3, and 5, and I think clearly all of those things would help us have confidence in the output from the operating model and how that affects our decision making going forward. And as a number of commissioners have spoken today, E3, the evaluation of presentation results, I think is very critical to making sure that the public and commissioners and everyone else that's involved in this has the best opportunity to understand the evaluation and what that is saying to us as we manage this resource. So I think those things to me are still very high priorities. The other one that was touched upon too, and I want to get some clarification about that, is the role of the MSAB. I think the MSAB has got us to where we are with the technical work that's been undertaken by the Secretariat, and I want to make sure that the MSAB is still actively engaged in the MSE work going forward. I think from what I've heard today, it won't be as much time for the MSAB, a need for their efforts as much as it has been historically, but I still want to make sure that they're actively engaged in providing direction to the Secretariat, but also helping us as commissioners. On the management procedure one, I struggle a little bit. I guess personally I'm still interested in M3, the multi-year assessment. I think there's some real utility in having a multi-year assessment, and that, as I think Alan said earlier in his presentation today, that would free us up for some time for some of the other tasks potentially. And maybe the one on the M1, the size limits, I think what I heard from Alan today is that that would take a lot of effort, and so maybe this is not the time at this point, but clearly I think you've expressed, and I think I heard Bob expressed there's still an interest in that. So maybe there's still some other discussion on that to come today. The last point I would make, I think, is around the recommendation for the MSC and the economic input. I think at this point in time, I would like to see that recommendation deferred, I guess, Glenn. Yeah, I think I'll just stop there. Thank you.
Is able to be accomplished for the 2022 annual meeting, but that additional progress can be made on that issue. I think in the past we have identified some potential future challenges that we may have with yield, given what we currently know about stock trajectory, and making some progress on better understanding the implications of modifying size limits could be useful for the Commission moving forward. So that would be one thought based on the comments that we've had so far today. And I'll pause to see if that general plan is something that other commissioners believe would be helpful as well. Commissioner Morel? Yeah, thanks. I think the suggestion was it's been identified that that's a fairly substantial lift. And I think that we could make progress on better understanding the implications of modifying size limits. But I'm not sure that we could get to a point the technical issues, the issues here, M3 as well, the multi-year assessment that I think has been generally supported.
For two additions or other details. With respect to the size limit, I think I would be very interested to have a discussion about conditions under which we could foresee changes to a size limit. I mean, notwithstanding where all the analysis and the work to procedures that include consideration of changes to the size limit, where that may go. But rather than leave the discussion about, well, can we implement it to the end? I think there is a discussion to be had, and that would be useful to start earlier than later, to say, yeah, what are the conditions under which those kinds of changes might be something that or that we collectively would be supportive of seeing any changes. Should that work on management procedures and so on point to support for the potential to change? So that's my first comment or suggestion to perhaps add to the way we frame our recommendations. And then my second point was M3 around multi-year assessments. I think conceptually something of interest, it sounds like, to a number of us. But also that we may, before we kind of, I think there's a step prior to jumping in with that one that maybe would ask the Secretariat to define what that means a bit more, so that we have a clear and shared understanding of what we mean when we use that term. And then perhaps Dr. Hicks can offer a perspective on that now. I suspect that it would end up being we want to explore a little bit because there may not be just one answer in terms of the way that could look. Thank you.
Which is almost a year-long process for the Secretariat to just do a full assessment. And in those in-between years that we'll call what we call update assessments, we take the data, update all the data, make sure the model's still performing as expected, and then create all the decision tables and present that to the Commission. And it's a little less rigorously reviewed, I guess you would say, at the SRB, because not much new is coming into it during those update years. What a multi-year assessment in terms of M3 suggests is actually allowing for more research time in those non-assessment years. So not even doing an update assessment. So the decision table is not presented to the commission. The assessment models are not actually run in those non-assessment years. But what that means is that there still has to be some method to put in a mortality limit, a TCY. And those methods could be as simple as, and we've already investigated this, the mortality limit is set for a 2-year period and just constant over those 2-year periods, and then the assessment is done every second year. We could even combine M2 and M3 to have some really simple empirical based method in those non-assessment years to potentially change the TCY. If the survey is going up, maybe a slight increase in the TCY or something like that. So there still is some specifics in the definition to be done there. The most simple approach is to not do an assessment every other year, or to do an assessment every other year. And in the non-assessment years, just hold that mortality limit constant. And we've already begun to investigate that when we did the coast-wide MSE. And then the sky's the limit after that. And I think that might be where, as you mentioned, maybe some discussion about what this looks like might be useful, at the 2022 annual meeting, as we begin to think about exactly what this type of multi-year assessment management procedure looks like, what's done in an off assessment year.
At least Canadian commissioners will have on that, and so that could be part of a commissioner discussion. There may also be questions that we would like to put to at least Dr. Hicks, or maybe the Secretariat sort of science staff more generally, about things we should be considering in terms of being in a position to make a change with respect to the size limit. And it may also be the case that others have something to say on it too. So in a way, it's kind of a terrible answer to your question. It might be a little bit of each of those things. But maybe to suggest that, as a start, perhaps one of the action items or things coming away from this discussion is, a bit of an action item that says we will have a follow-up discussion about those conditions and invite input from, the relevant sort of expertise or sources to inform that. That might be a way to begin, but happy to hear the perspectives of other commissioners on that as well.
a need for the commissioners to further describe what some of those issues may be, and that there will be additional engagement with stakeholders, whether that's through the MSAP process and engagement with the IPHC Secretariat in the future as we move forward on that issue. Is that a fair characterization of where we may want to go?
Hear me now?
So we'll try that.
Yes, can you hear me?
We can, or I can.
Hello? Are you able to hear me, Glenn?
I am, Richard.
Okay. I'm sorry about computer problems. My computer died, so I'm on the phone. So I just like to follow up comment. I agree with the priority of F1 and F2. That is critical in making any decision in the future. And I kind of feel the same way about making any decisions on any MPs without having the full knowledge of that research. I also believe that the size limit issue is a very important one to stakeholders, but again, unless we understand the issue with size of age and the distribution and migration, size of age is only going to be a short-term kind of answer to for us for potentially maybe economic or increased catch, but we're not going to have the answer to what's the long-term effect of making any decisions on size of age. So although it's very important, I kind of feel that the further work on F1 and F2, and obviously the communication component, which wasn't a heavy lift, but obviously is necessary, is a priority for me as well. And whether we should deal with multi-year aspects of it, as Dr. Hicks said, we've done some work on that already. Probably wouldn't be much more work to do it to see what would happen. In the short term, there's for the amount of work and the potential benefit, cost savings to the commission, and I think it might be worth taking on that, the M3. So sorry about the losing connection, but that's my comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Glenn. Yes, I support what you had outlined as a way forward, and maybe a task to put to Dr. Hicks is to provide some more information around size limits and how he would see that unfolding going forward, along with timeframes, would, I think, maybe help us commissioners understand a little more of the impediments and what's needed to see if we want to implement a change around size limits.
Of this and sort of bringing it in to this MSE task or program of work, as a task not to complete a full analysis of it, but to continue investigation of it, I think is a nice compromise to continue that forward momentum. At this time, I really can't provide any comments on, well, I can if you want to go into a more lengthy discussion of sort of what would be required of that, but it would, in summary, for me to do an analysis of size limits, I would want to do a complete analysis so that it leaves as many questions as possible, or answers as many questions as possible and doesn't leave any still out there.
Agreed.
Specific length-based models to make assumptions, and although it's less accurate, it could be useful. Like, how much shorter would the timeline be if you made that assumption?
But understanding that relationship for Pacific halibut is simulating that process for Pacific halibut is challenging because, one, it's highly variable and we don't understand all the processes at this time because not a lot of people have been working on it. They've sort of said we can do this a different way that is, for the assessment purposes, works really well and doesn't have to worry about all that uncertainty and potential modeling and assumptions. But for size limits, we would want to potentially bring that in. And we can make assumptions about that, as you said, that would be reasonable, but open it for criticism. And we don't know if those assumptions are, capturing the full nuances of the population dynamics in that sense, but they would provide results. So they could be criticized, but they would still be results that could be used for management decisions. And that's commonly done in all models. Remember, no model is exact, no model is perfect, some are useful. In terms of time frame on that, as I mentioned before, I would still like to do a full analysis of size limits, and I think there's some desire to understand when, we're looking at a very specific period now in the short term, but what happens when size at age changes or distribution changes or movement changes? What might be the effect of a size limit or no size limit in different eras or different periods of time with different population dynamics going on? And I would want to look at those to help the commission understand, is like, we're looking at this period now that's, small size at age, this distribution pattern, and what if size at age got bigger? This might be the pattern. So you understand not only the long-term effects on average, averaged over a wide range of uncertainties, but you understand as well the potential short-term effects in different periods of time. And that, of course, is my own desire in an analysis, is to be as complete as possible. And I think that is the part that would take, a good year of work to really have a full investigation of variability and the range of outcomes of size limit options over these different periods of time. But it could be shortened and just look at size limits on average over a range of uncertainty as well, only in the long term, which might leave some questions still open.
At that point. So with that said, that's certainly enough for the Secretariat to move forward with drafting the report. Thanks, Chair.
Want to just go ahead and try and proceed through to the budget issues in the interest of trying to end our meeting perhaps a little earlier, but certainly would pause if commissioners would like to take a break for a moment. Okay, seeing no hands, why don't we launch into the budget discussion if we could, Dr. Wilson?
Is that there was an informal request from both contracting parties to freeze the FY 2022 overall budget at 2021 levels. So in accordance with Regulation 5, Paragraph 3 of the IPHC financial regulations, which is also provided to you on the screen here, Secretariat, I'm just noting that I cannot scroll. Don't know if you can activate that so I can scroll down through the paper. Still not allowing me to scroll. Okay, look, I'm going to keep talking and request that somebody come into the room to give me a hand so that I can manually scroll myself, please. So at the FAC 97, the FAC recommended that the Commission agree that the two contracting parties engage in intersessional discussions over the next coming months to adopt a budget for FY 2022 and the associated contributions. And in doing so, the Commission may request that the Secretariat provide additional assistance. Sorry, I'm just going to pause one moment here just while I get some technical assistance to fix the issue that's here. So just bear with us for a moment.
I can help you. I'm not quite sure why it's so. Oh, you're on the presenter screen. Can you do it on this one?
This is mine.
Okay, so, all right. I know what to do, I think.
All right, so just bear with us there for a moment. At the 97th session of the annual meeting, the Commission considered the recommendation from the FAC, which is shown in the paper, and while noting the proposed budget of the contributions from the two contracting parties, it again agreed that they would engage in intersessional discussions over the coming months to adopt a potential budget and associated contributions. Should not be less than the contributions for FY 2021. And this would result in a contribution of approximately $900,000 from Canada and 4.1 million approximately from the USA. These contributions would be exclusive of the payments towards the former staff pension plan liability or deficit, and also the IPHC headquarters costs, the lease and maintenance. So noting that the intersessional directive to reduce the overall budget proposed for FY 2022 to the 2021 level would require an overall reduction of approximately $252,000, the Secretariat went through a process of budget rationalization to the core funds, Fund 10, which is the general fund, 20, which is research, and 30, which is statistics, to get those numbers down to the requested FY 2021 levels. And Table 1 just provides the illustration of what was proposed at the FAC 97 and considered at the AM 97, and what is now being proposed here at the 11th special session. Now, the proposed budget for FY 2022 is provided at Appendix 1 of Paper 04. And I'm going to make the assumption that you have looked through that proposed budget in detail. And to get to those levels, we had to make a number of reductions or revisions down for several of the key budget lines. And some of those key reductions we've provided or shown and provided to you in Table 2 of Paper 04. Other budget lines which haven't been specifically called out have been revised through a detailed budget review process, resulting in some budget lines being increased, such as meetings and conferences, noting that in FY 2022 we are now expected to be back to being fully operational with in-person meetings, and others having been decreased. And this is more just a rationalization of some of our travel expenses, for example. So if we scroll to Table 2, you can see that while we're targeting around $252,000 reduction, you can see a number of the lines that are now being reduced as a result. Firstly is salaries and wages. We do have one vacant position currently within the Fisheries Statistics Services branch, and the intention is to keep that position vacant for FY 2022, or even potentially reassign that position for FY 2023. In addition, we went through a process of reviewing all salaries and rationalizing those to become more precise in our estimates, and that resulted in another $31,000 saving to the budget. For benefits, similarly, we went through a process of looking at all of our current staff and predictions for FY 2022, and simply by undertaking that reassessment of benefits and taking into account some of the rationalization we've made to our benefits over the past year, again, that has resulted in a saving estimate of $115,000. Similarly, for medical reimbursement for retirees, we now have a very precise estimate of what we expect to pay. And so this is, again, just a rationalization and an improved estimate of calculation of those benefits, resulting in a $9,000 saving. And then we have an example. We have our contingency budget line of around $53,000, and so we were able to make an estimated reduction of $18,000 in that regard. And so the only other key elements that are of keynote, I guess, is the general increases associated with those salaries and benefits, including healthcare costs. Some of those are automatic in terms of we don't control how those elements are increased, particularly from our healthcare provider. And those have been offset elsewhere in the budget, which is provided at Appendix 1. And so we're simply asking that, first of all, you note these amendments and why they came about, and to adopt the FY 2022 budget, which is provided at Appendix 1. And I can put that budget up on screen. I'm relying on you all having your own version of this, as it would be too small for you to read in detail on the screen at the moment. But the table itself is at the higher level. It shows those budget contributions to the general fund from Canada and the United States. And it highlights that those first 4 columns that you can see for FY 2022 are the 10 general, the 20 research, and 30 statistics. And then also the total for those 3 funds. The 40 column, which is the Fishery Independent Setline Survey, is purely an estimate. It is based on the version that was provided to you at the AM97, and the intention is to revise that based on this year's fish sale prices and vessel contract prices, and represent that to you for re-endorsement later in the year, most likely at the work meeting and then also at the interim meeting. So column 40 is simply there as a place marker. But again, that has no impact on the contributions from the contracting parties, as it's a revenue neutral fund. You will also note that at the bottom, you'll see that there is now a balanced budget for each of the funds, meaning that you're now able to clearly identify the money coming in from the contracting parties and any grants and how they are spent and accounted for in FY 2022. So that's all I have, Chair. It's a relatively straightforward budget amendment, a reduction down to a number of key lines to ensure that we are now aligned with the FY 2021 overall budget amount, which is going to be also provided for FY 2022. And so I'll pass back to you, Chair, if there are any questions. Thank you.
For halibut was back in February, or has that been upgraded since you maybe have received some prices recently?
Is very much a place marker from the annual meeting, and it's going to be revised, most likely up, given that the fish price has substantially improved this year based on from last year.
So one last question, David, is I remember we did not approve all areas, but the areas that you guys recommended, where in your comments, are you suggesting you're going to be adding new areas to the survey, or could you clarify your comment?
Sure. Through the chair, Commissioner Alverson. So the areas that you approved at the previous commission meeting were related to 2021, so this current year, and the survey is expected to be wrapped up by August, September, and so this is relating to next year's 2022 fishery independence line survey, and so at this point rather, the commission has only tentatively endorsed that survey plan.
Yes, excuse me, I'm a year off, so thank you.
Commissioner Alverson. Dr. Wilson, if I may, just walking through the specific reductions that you have, just to put a fine point on it so that I make sure that I understand this correctly. The one position that you're holding vacant is the only, as I understand this, reduction in staff capacity. In other words, we're not going to be filling that position, and that would result in some savings that were previously anticipated, or costs that were previously anticipated are not accrued due to the fact that we're not filling that position. Let's see. Paul, any comments, questions from you?
Through the chair, if that's a
And assuming there's a second from Canada? SS01104. Hearing any objection, I believe that budget is adopted. Dr. Wilson, is there anything further on budget issues? Thank you, Dr. Wilson. Okay. Well, given that, I would suggest we have a motion to adjourn the meeting with the understanding that we would adopt the report later via correspondence. And not seeing any hands or hearing any objection, I think that motion passes. Anything else further to address at this meeting? Don't think so. So thank you, everyone, for your time and engagement and taking away some of your summer sun. Well, if you're outside of Alaska, that is. So I hope everyone has a good summer, and we will all see each other in hopefully person coming up